A king, a blade, 100,000 men marching on 300. This is Thermopylae, and somehow 2,000 years later, people still show up. Hundreds of thousands of them, every single year, just to stand where one warrior stood. Call that morbid if you want. I think it's something else. Because here's the thing, we've always been a little obsessed with people who refused to run. The ones who looked at impossible odds, an army 10 times their size, a fortress falling apart around them, one bullet left in the chamber, and decided to stay anyway. Not because they thought they'd win. They just figured some things are worth dying for. So that's what this is. You're not just going to hear about these last stands, you're going to see them the way they actually looked. 10 people, 10 groups, 10 moments where a handful of humans stood against overwhelming force and somehow changed everything that came after. 20 minutes, 10 last stands. Let's get into it. The year is 1566. The Ottoman Empire is at the height of its power. Suleiman the Magnificent, longest reigning sultan in Ottoman history, is marching on Vienna for the second time. To reach it, he's got to pass through a small fortress town in southern Hungary called Szigetvár. It isn't much to look at. A bunch of walls made from earth with a castle on a muddy island and a town of wooden buildings. But his commander, a Croatian-Hungarian nobleman named Nikola Zrinski, has decided that'll do. Suleiman arrives with an army somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000 men, the full might of the Ottoman war machine. It's got artillery, janissaries, and siege engineers who have cracked walls bigger and stronger than this. Zrinski has maybe 2,300 soldiers. He doesn't even think of retreating. The siege starts in August. First, the Ottomans take the outer town, then they take the inner town. Each position that Zrinski gives up, he makes the Ottomans pay for in blood. Every time the enemy causes a breach in the walls, the Hungarians stuff it using their own bodies. They fight from burning buildings. Anytime the Ottomans get close, they pour hot oil on them. The Hungarians even cook their own food over the same fires the Ottomans set trying to burn them out. For 33 days, the fortress holds. Suleiman never sees it fall. The greatest sultan in Ottoman history dies in his tent on September 6th, 2 days before the final assault at the age of 71 of natural causes. His grand viziers keep his death a secret, hoping to keep the morale of the army up. In the name of a dead emperor, the siege goes on. 2 days later, on September 8th, the inner castle is burning and all hope is lost. Zrinski dresses in his finest uniform, takes a handful of his last surviving men, and charges directly into the Ottoman army. He is cut down within seconds, but he knew that before he left. The fall of Szigetvár delays the Ottoman march long enough that the military campaign season ends. The army turns back without reaching Vienna. Austria gets to live on. The Holy League has time to organize. Historians would later write that the fate of Christian Europe was decided not at the gates of Vienna, but in a muddy fortress in Hungary, by a man who chose to meet his end in a blaze of glory, while wearing his best clothing. You don't see this one in many history textbooks, but we really should. It's May 1527. Rome is burning. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V has let loose an army of Spanish soldiers and German mercenaries. It's not what he wants, but he's run out of money to pay them, and unpaid mercenaries have a way of paying themselves. What follows is one of the most destructive events in Renaissance history, the sack of Rome. Churches get looted, palaces get ransacked, nuns get assaulted in the streets, cardinals get held for ransom. The Renaissance basically ends here in an afternoon. Pope Clement VII is inside the Vatican. He's only got 189 Swiss guards for protection, the same colorful guys in yellow and blue uniforms you can see outside St. Peter's Basilica today. When the imperial soldiers breach the walls, 147 of those guards die buying time for the Pope to escape through a secret passage connecting the Vatican to Castel San Angelo. 42 make it out. The Pope lives on. The papacy is saved. The Swiss Guard has protected every pope since. When you see those colorful uniforms today and feel the urge to laugh, just remember, their history was written in blood in 1527 when most of them chose to die rather than let the enemy through. January 1879. The British military gets hit with one of its biggest defeats in colonial history at the Battle of Isandlwana. Long story short, a Zulu army of 20,000 warriors annihilated a garrison of 1,300 British. A few miles away from that disaster, at a small mission called Rorke's Drift, Lieutenant John Shard, an engineer, not even an army officer, commands a garrison of approximately 150 men. Most of them are sick. The hospital is full. They have a storehouse with some food sack bags and biscuit boxes they stack into makeshift walls. Then, around 4 in the afternoon, 5,000 Zulu warriors appear in the distance. What happens over the next 12 hours is something that military historians still study. The British hold an area roughly the same size as a tennis court. Wave after wave of Zulu attack. The fighting is intense. Some of it is close quarter combat, with men literally reaching for each other across the makeshift walls. Soldiers drag their wounded comrades away from the fighting. The hospital catches fire. Men crawl through burning rooms, carrying patients they refuse to leave behind. At dawn, the Zulu warriors withdraw. 17 British soldiers are dead. The Zulu losses number in the hundreds. 11 of Britain's highest military honors, the Victoria Cross, are awarded for that one night. That's more than any other engagement in British military history, and it remains that way to this day. Nobody remembers Rorke's drift because of what was won. They remember it because of what kind of people these men turned out to be when the night closed in and the fires were burning, and there was nowhere left to run. You already know this one, or at least you think you do. 480 BC. King Xerxes of Persia has assembled the largest army the ancient world has ever seen. Estimates range from 100,000 to over 1 million. That million number is an exaggeration. Historians still debate on the exact size, but this is what is not debatable. The Persian army is enormous. It is unstoppable, and they're heading for Greece. But first, they gotta get through a pass. Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. It's a narrow strip of coast in central Greece, barely wide enough for a chariot. King Leonidas of Sparta arrives with 300 Spartans and maybe 7,000 allied Greek soldiers to hold it long enough for the rest of Greece to prepare. For 2 days, the Persian army breaks itself against the Greek phalanx. The Spartans rotate fresh men from the rear to replace the tired fighters at the front. This helps them to maintain their formation. The superior numbers of the Persians mean nothing in a pass where you can only attack a few men at a time. Xerxes watches from his throne as unit after unit of his elite soldiers are cut down. There were rumors that he jumps up from his throne 3 separate times in shock because of this battle and what he is seeing. That detail, whether you believe it or not, says a lot. Then, a local Greek man named Ephialtes betrays them. He shows the Persians a mountain path around the pass. Leonidas sends most of the Greeks south to safety. He stays with his 300 Spartans, a handful of Thespians and a few hundred others. They all know what's coming. They choose to stay anyway. Maybe to buy time, or maybe to cover the retreat. But I think it's just because Spartans don't run from a fight. Surrounded on all sides, they fight to the last man. The Persian fleet is defeated at Salamis a few weeks later. Greece survives. Western civilization survives. And all of it traces back, at least in part, to 300 men who stood in a pass and said, "Not today. Not while we're still standing." This one was classified by the Irish government for decades. A lot of people still don't know it. September 1961. The United Nations sends a company of Irish soldiers to protect a mining town called Jadotville in the Katanga region of the Congo during a brutal civil war. 155 Irishmen. Their commander is Commandant Pat Quinlan. What they don't know when they arrive is that the local mercenary force, backed by Belgian and French commanders paid off by mining companies, has decided the UN presence is a threat. On September 13th, around 3,000 soldiers and mercenaries surround the small Irish compound and open fire. For 5 days, the Irish company holds out. They have no reinforcements. The UN sends help, but the help is ambushed and forced back. They run out of water, they have no food. Quinlan's men dig holes and cover themselves with as much dirt as they can during air attacks. They treat their wounded while taking enemy fire. They ration their ammunition, they stagger their defenses, and they refuse to break. After 155 hours of combat, with no water left, and men about to collapse from exhaustion and thirst, they surrender. Not to the mercenaries, but under a ceasefire truce. Their casualty count, 5 wounded. Not one man killed in 5 days of sustained combat against an enemy 20 times their size. No Victoria Crosses, no official recognition. The Irish government quietly brushed the entire event off to the side and didn't speak of it again for 30 years. In 2016, a movie finally told the story. The phrase that Quinlan's men wore as a badge of honor afterward said it plainly. We were never beaten. Not all last stands are chosen. Some are ordered. October 1854, the Crimean War. Either a miscommunication or an unclear order, depending on who you believe, sends 670 British cavalry directly into the mouth of a heavily fortified Russian position in the valley below Balaclava. Lord Cardigan receives the order and reportedly says, "Here goes the last of the Brutinels." He's talking about his family lineage and how he more than likely won't be making it out of this one alive. Then, he leads his men forward anyway. They ride directly into cannon fire from 3 sides. Shells tear through the ranks, horses go down screaming, men are blown from their saddles, and the Light Brigade keeps riding forward. They actually reach the Russian guns. They fight hand to hand against the artillery crews. Then, they have to ride back through the same gauntlet of enemy fire. About 110 men are killed, around 160 wounded, roughly 375 horses are lost. Of the original 670 who charged, perhaps 195 make it back uninjured. It was rumored the French general watching from the ridge said, "It is magnificent, but it is not war." The poet, Alfred Lord Tennyson, writes the famous poem, The Charge of the Light Brigade, after hearing the news. It makes the Light Brigade immortal. They were sent to their deaths by a miscommunication. They knew it was wrong. They chose to ride anyway. This last stand is different from all the others. No trained soldiers, no professional warriors, no military infrastructure. April 19th, 1943, the German SS enters the Warsaw Ghetto. It's a closed-off district where the Nazis had crammed over 400,000 Polish Jews in order to begin shipping them off to concentration camps. They expect no resistance. What they find instead stops them cold. The Jewish Combat Organization, led by 23-year-old Mordecai Anielewicz, opens fire. They use homemade bombs, pistols, and a handful of rifles that they've managed to smuggle through the walls one by one over months of getting ready. The SS withdraws on the first day. For 27 days, the uprising continues, block by block, building by building, room by room. The Germans eventually resort to burning the ghetto completely, building by building, to drive the fighters out. The fighters move through sewers. They fight from the rubble. They know they're not going to win. They've always known they're not going to win. But winning was never the point. In a letter written before the end, Anielewicz writes that what they have done together surpasses all our expectations. They proved something that the Nazis had been determined to erase from history, that these people fought back, that they were not passive, and they chose how their story would end. Anielewicz dies in May 1943, likely at his command post when the Germans flood the bunker with gas. He is only 24 years old. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising remains the largest single revolt by Jewish people during the Holocaust. It's not a story about defeat. It's a story about what it means to refuse to simply disappear. Japan is changing in 1877, and not everyone is willing to change with it. The Meiji Restoration has dismantled the old ways. The samurai class, along with centuries of tradition, privilege, and identity, is being done away with completely. The government has banned the carrying of swords. Former samurai are being told to become farmers, merchants, or civil servants. They're being told to become ordinary. Saigō Takamori, the greatest samurai of the 19th century, cannot accept this. He starts a rebellion. At his peak, he commands 40,000 men. But the new Imperial Japanese Army, trained in Western tactics, armed with modern rifles and artillery, chips away at his forces over months of brutal fighting. By September 1877, on a hill called Shiroyama, Saigō has 500 men left. The Imperial Army surrounding them numbers around 30,000, with artillery, warships in the harbor, and all the firepower of a modern nation. The Imperial commander sends a message offering safe surrender. Saigō doesn't respond. At dawn, the Imperial Army opens a devastating artillery bombardment. Then they charge at the samurai. Saigō's men fight back with rifles and swords, then at the very end, only swords. The samurai mount their own charge downhill into the Imperial lines. Most are cut down immediately. Saigō himself is injured and, following the samurai tradition of seppuku, dies on the hill. He is immediately elevated to legendary status by the Japanese nation, even by the government that destroyed him. He becomes a cultural hero, a symbol of loyalty, honor, and the lost world that Japan was mourning even as it was abolishing it. The last samurai didn't actually save anything, but he showed his country what it was giving up, and Japan has been grieving that loss in its own way ever since. September 1897, the northwest frontier of British India in what is now Pakistan. A small signal post called Saragarhi sits between two larger British forts. 21 soldiers of the 36th Sikh Regiment are stationed there. Their commanding officer is Havildar Ishar Singh. At around 9 in the morning, 10,000 Afghan Orakzai tribesmen surround the post and demand that they surrender. Ishar Singh sends a heliograph message to the nearest fort. They are under attack. They will not retreat. Send help if you can. Help won't be able to reach them in time. What happens next lasts for 7 hours. 21 men defend a small fortified post against 10,000. They take turns at the walls. They rotate firing positions. They hold. One by one they fall, but the post keeps firing. The last defender, Gurmukh Singh, kills 20 tribesmen single-handedly before the post is finally breached. Every one of the 21 soldiers is posthumously awarded the Indian Order of Merit, the highest award available to Indian soldiers at the time. The Indian Parliament still observes Saragarhi Day every September 12th. It's almost impossible to believe, but the records survive. The battle reports survive. It happened exactly as described. 21 against 10,000. 7 hours. Some stories don't even need to be exaggerated. We end not with a siege, but with a courtyard, a burning hacienda, 65 men against 2,000, and a story the French Foreign Legion has never been allowed to forget. April 1863, Mexico. France has been trying to prop up an imperial government, all while the US Civil War is going on, and the Legion has been tasked with escorting a supply convoy through enemy territory. Captain Jean d'Anjou commands a company of 62 legionnaires and 3 officers. On the road to Puebla, they are spotted by Mexican cavalry. Then as the sun climbs, by 800 infantry, and then more, until the numbers growing around them reach somewhere between 1,200 and 2,000 men. D'Anjou has no chance of holding open ground. He makes for the nearest structure, the Hacienda de la Trinidad. It's a farmstead, but it's falling apart. The walls are crumbling, its outbuildings are all dilapidated, and its central courtyard is barely larger than a tennis court. He gathers his men before the fighting starts. He makes them swear an oath. They will not surrender. All of his men swear it. Then the battle begins. The Mexican forces attack in waves. They offer terms. Surrendering your lives will be spared. The Legion declines. Terms are offered again. Surrender now before more of you die. The Legion declines again. All morning, then into the afternoon, the hacienda holds. Captain d'Anjou is killed when he gets shot at 11 in the morning. His second in charge takes command. He is killed by noon. The third officer takes command of a company that now numbers maybe 20 men. By early evening, the walls have been breached. The buildings are burning, and there are only 5 legionnaires left. They fix bayonets and charge. 3 survive the charge. They are surrounded, out of ammunition, and barely able to stand. The Mexican colonel finally stops the assault, not out of cruelty, but because he cannot believe what he is looking at. He offers the 3 men full honors, their lives, their weapons, safe passage, if they will just stop. One of the survivors speaks for the 3 of them. He says, "We will surrender if you allow us to keep our weapons and care for our wounded officer." The colonel agrees, saying afterward, "These are not men, they are devils." The Legion lost 23 dead and 16 wounded at Camerone. The Mexican force suffered over 300 casualties. Every year on April 30th, the French Foreign Legion observes Camerone Day, the holiest date on their calendar. The wooden prosthetic hand that Captain d'Anjou wore into battle, he had lost his real hand years before in a separate battle, was recovered from the site and is carried in procession at every Camerone ceremony, treated with the reverence of a sacred relic. They did not win at Camerone. They did not save the convoy. The mission technically failed. But they kept their oath. Every single one of them. To the last 5 men, then to the last 3. And the French Foreign Legion decided that was worth more than victory. Here's the thing about places like Szigetvár or Thermopylae or that ruined hacienda at Camerone. You stand there today and it just hits you. Not sadness exactly, not awe exactly, something in between. Because these weren't superheroes. They were just people. People with names, with families, with someone waiting for them who they were probably never going to see again. And they were terrified. Anyone would be. They held the line anyway. That's the whole story, honestly. That's why we're still talking about them. If this trip through 10 of history's craziest last stands hit you the way it hit me, do me a solid and smash that like button, and subscribe if you want more of this. And I want to know, which one wrecked you the most? Drop it in the comments. And if I miss one that deserves to be on this list, tell me, because I guarantee I'm making a part 2. History's never really finished. It's a conversation that we're all still having, and it lives in every grain of the hourglass. We'll see you in the next era.